Gladiator II is an epic historical action film directed and co-produced by Ridley Scott. Taking place 16 years later, the film serves as a sequel to Gladiator from 2000, which was also directed by Ridley Scott. The film stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, Fred Hetchinger, and Denzel Washington, as well as Connie Nielsen and Derek Jacobi, who reprise their roles from the first film. Mescal portrays Lucius, the son of revered hero Maximus and Lucilla, who left Rome after witnessing Maximus's death at the hands of his uncle. After his home is invaded and conquered by the Roman army led by General Marcus Acacius, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum. Lucius seeks revenge against Acacius and fights as a gladiator for Macrinus, a former slave who plans to overthrow tyrannical emperors Geta and Caracalla. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, Lucius must look to his past to find strength and honor to return the glory of Rome to its people. This review will be spoiler-free. There has been a lot said about this film being an unnecessary sequel, and that it follows the structure of the original too closely. Be honest though, were you not entertained? No film is technically necessary. Perhaps if it ends in such a way as to indicate a follow-up that will complete an unfinished story, then sure, it's necessary, but otherwise it is only something that can be financially justifiable. I don't really buy into these arguments though. Anything can be good, and you have to reserve judgment for when the film comes out, regardless of whether it's a sequel to a classic film or not. I really try not to be cynical as I get older when it comes to mainstream cinema. I don't think that it helps anyone to take those perspectives. Many people disparaged the trailers, and yet I thought that they looked awesome. Okay, like they used a Kanye West song and it wasn't necessarily the vibe, but that song's not in the film, like it doesn't take away from how good the visuals were. I didn't really understand the hate for that first trailer. Once again, I thought it looked awesome. I am a Ridley Scott champion though. Obviously he has directed some of the greatest films ever made in Alien and Blade Runner, as well as very solid classics like Thelma and Louise and even The Martian more recently. But I am someone who enjoys much of his recent output, the ones that get slammed, the ones people use to argue that Scott is over the hill. Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and The Last Duel were all interesting and underrated. I didn't like Napoleon for reasons to do with the screenplay and interpretation of the character, but the production value was something to behold in this day and age especially. We are so lucky to still be getting films of this scale. It is shocking that Scott is able to do epics better than almost anyone, and he is 86 years old. I am not ageist, but many would have slowed down by this point. Once he and other giants from his era pass away, I fear that Hollywood will not grant young filmmakers this kind of power. Although an argument can be made against that when we do have people like John M. Chu directing films like Wicked this year as well, where the film really goes for the same approach as this movie, with more of an emphasis on sets, locations, and practical effects. Gladiator II has monumental production design. The film is gorgeous. You can see that the sets are vast and that CGI was used as an enhancer for backgrounds and such, while much of the ancient Roman architecture was built for real. The budget is said to be between $210 million to $310 million. And while I have had major issues with bloated Hollywood budgets of late, you can at least actually see the money on the screen this time around, and it looks amazing. The fight sequences are framed in great wide shots to showcase the size of everything. The whole film is shot in a dynamic manner, rarely cutting back and forth to camera setups we've already seen. The camera is always showing us something from a new angle. It seems obvious that you should really want to sell the way that Rome looks when the film is centered around Roman culture, but a lot of major studios would just go for a volume or for a green screen. And if they'd gone for something like that with this, it wouldn't even hold a candle to the original. Now, I'm sure a lot of people don't think it holds a candle to the original, and yes, it's not as good as the original, but I think it's a worthy sequel. Unlike many other Hollywood blockbusters, the action isn't chopped to pieces in the edit. It allows the scenes to breathe and you can easily follow what is going on, and that is because they did the work. They don't have to cut around bad choreography. The same can be said for the pacing overall. It is 148 minutes, and it never drags. It does take a while to clear the runway, but it is never boring. They actually built a Colosseum that is a third of the size of the real one. That is so awesome. You have to appreciate that, regardless of your opinion of the story. Most films would use green screen for the Colosseum and it would look terrible. This all really makes a difference. You have to believe what you are seeing, even in an intentionally over-the-top film like this one. And it is intentional, so however annoyed you are by how over-the-top it is, too bad. That's the intention of the filmmaker. Many have fussed over the naval battle, for example, in the Colosseum. However, historical records suggest that the Romans had staged these battles by flooding the arena, so it is not entirely fictional. The first film in and of itself was not entirely historically accurate, so I don't think it is worth complaining about. The naval battle was also one of the coolest sequences in the whole film, and along with some more of the hand-to-hand combat, it separates itself from the first film by having different set pieces. The part that is unequivocally false is that sharks were involved in these battles, but who cares? It makes the sequence just that much more fun. The one sequence that I flat out disliked, and I suppose you could say maybe I'm contradicting myself because I'm okay with the sharks, but anyway, I disliked the battle with the CGI monkeys in the first act. This is the one sequence that went too far for me, and it's mainly because, the sharks are just presented as how they are, how we know them. But these vicious monkeys look like no breed to have ever existed, and the CG was only okay. The sequence was very silly, and I would have preferred something more restrained, but luckily it is all over very quickly. I'm sure that they just were trying to differentiate it from the first one, which presented this kind of scene as just hand-to-hand combat between men. As for the structure of the film, I suppose it does follow that of the first film, but you have to get Lucius into the ring without anyone knowing who he is, so that we can have action and tension, so I wasn't really bothered by that. My issues lie in the screenplay lacking depth in areas that it needed it. When compared with Russell Crowe's Maximus, Lucius is not a great protagonist. He isn't bad, he just isn't unique enough when compared with Maximus. He doesn't shine, I couldn't bring myself to care too much for him or identify with him, and the film doesn't really have much to say about him as a human being. The first film has a lot more to say philosophically regarding the protagonist, but I suppose that's often par for the course with sequels. Still, this one doesn't really have much meaning to it compared to the first one, which can transcend the generic Hollywood blockbuster thematically. Regardless of my desire for a deeper character in Lucius, Paul Mescal is one of my favourite actors, and here he proves that he is a star. He does his usual introspective and quiet acting here, which is great, but he has no trouble growling and screaming in pain or anger when needed. He didn't get cut for the role, he got beefed up and looks appropriately strong. Many will think that his performance is maybe too understated next to his co-stars, but like I said, he really didn't have all that much to work with on the page. Pedro Pascal plays Marcus Acacius, a Roman general who trained under Maximus. In the great opening battle sequence, he leads an army to take over North Africa and invades Lucius's home. I found Marcus to be an extremely intriguing character. He is not what he seems. He has many shades. Unfortunately, he is not utilised as much as I would have preferred, and you could argue that he is just there as a plot device. Pedro Pascal is a great actor though, so it is never bad to watch him. Connie Nielsen returns as Lucilla, and she is once again great. I was happy with the direction that they took her character. It felt right. There's not a lot I can say about her character because it will spoil the film, so I'll just leave it at that. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hetchinger play bratty and unhinged emperors Gita and Caracalla, respectively, and they are really fun to watch because they are so unpredictable. The absolute standout performance, to no one's surprise, is Denzel Washington as Macrinus. He is on another level here. His performance is much more exaggerated than much of the rest of the cast, but he knows how to make it convincing. Macrinus is a former slave who plans to control Rome. He keeps a stable of gladiators and mentors Lucius as his instrument. But of course Lucius has his own plans, and it was cool to see how he wouldn't abide by Macrinus in every way. You can see the unsureness in Macrinus. At first he is even a bit concerned that Lucius is such a maverick. He doesn't know what he will say or do next. He is risky. But that also excites Macrinus. Macrinus is not what he seems. He is eccentric, conniving, and intelligent. Washington chews up the screen. He is such a fun character that I really wish the script would raise its bar for him. Denzel Washington is definitely getting a Best Supporting Actor nomination for this because he was just awesome. I love politics in movies, and sometimes I found that the politics were a little undercooked here. It can feel very staccato in nature. This happens, which leads to this, which leads to this, and so on. A little bit more intrigue and plotting in between major happenings would have made everything feel more tense, and it would all flow more naturally. Still, clearly Scott wanted to go for a more entertainment, action-packed kind of film, as opposed to a political plotting one, so even though it has the runtime to be able to explore some of those themes, it chooses to go in more of the direction of a fun romp, which is honestly what I kind of wanted out of this film. I didn't really expect it to be something that was incredibly well written like Game of Thrones or something. I just wanted to be kind of wowed and have a really, really fun time, like with a popcorn style movie, and I did have fun. I was excited by Gladiator II, but you can never be sure if these legacy sequels are going to deliver. However, I think that this one does. It doesn't add much to the first one, but it complements it nicely, and I could see myself enjoying it on a rewatch at some point. I love the first Gladiator, and this obviously doesn't touch that film, but Ridley Scott did a damn fine job with it, and it is his best film in years. The cast is fantastic, the action is exciting, and the production design is immaculate. I just wish the script had fleshed out Lucius and the politics more. I highly recommend Gladiator II. I think it is an awesome film, and the kind of entertaining blockbuster that audiences need right now. This year has been a bit dry for that kind of stuff. I think this film will please general audiences and most fans of the original. I think that it sits alongside the original. I think it complements the original well enough. I hear a Gladiator 3 is already in the works. Okay. Sign me up, I'm keen, I'll watch it.